Movement in gaming is something that can really make or break a game for many people, ranging from the fast and stylish to the slow and thought-provoking. So please join me as we go through these motions together. Moving up and down to rebound your opponent's ball, to running right and jumping and squashing enemies to save your princess, or running and gunning through a demon infested Mars, or even climb the highest temples of Jerusalem. Movement in gaming is probably one of the most important mechanics to get right straight away. From making sure that it's not too heavy to even the complete opposite and making sure it's not too floaty. And it's just about getting that right amount of weight to blend perfectly with both controls and even the camera controls, and of course the secondary animations, which may rely on more of a real and stylistic look to the character's movements. For a while now, it's safe to say that we've solidified ourselves in perfecting the way we can move within different genres of gaming. From taking cover at the right time, from jumping at the right moment with a visual cue, or even following paths like lights and even yellow paint to show us and lead us to our objectives. And all these games for all these different generations start feeling like they're blended into one game overall. We learn to pick up the control and press forward without any thought behind it. I generally feel like that most people are just going through the motions when it comes to gaming and movement, with very little room to use our imagination in how to engage within their environments or even how to engage with characters and objectives within the world. And it is completely understandable why companies like to follow this formula. It's very like making a movie. You don't expect going into a popcorn flick action movie without there being over the top explosions and silly one-liners. It's all par for the course, and it's something that we just expect to pick up and go, or even be able to pick up and watch. It's just something that we know we're confident and comfortable in doing without having to put too much thought behind it. But every now and then we're given a little touch of hope, control and even skills to learn. There are so many amazing games out there that actually require you to master the movement and the mechanics of the character and get used to the weight and how we interact with the environments to get to A to B with our objectives. I remember being a kid and always leaning toward games that have a lot more platforming and even free running elements, from Prince of Persia to mastering the flips and jumps of Mario in 64 and even Sunshine. Then Assassin's Creed was released and everything changed. Nothing was a limitation within the city walls, and now everything was an obstacle for you to navigate. The early era of Assassin's Creed movement to this date is probably the most involved players are ever going to be within the series. Don't get me wrong, I don't think it looks as good as flashy as later entries now that they're using more slicker and fast and smoother animations, but it's probably some of the best connections and even interactivity that we're going to have with the characters of Assassin's Creed. The early Assassin's Creed games like to make sure that you're in full control of the character's body, with each button being dedicated to a different limb, making sure that the parkour was at least engaging even though it could look sluggish at most times. If there was a gap that looked too high, you had to thrust Ezio upwards and grab it with a press of a button. If you wanted to cancel halfway through a climb, then you was able to and jump in any direction to gain just that little bit of height above you. Over time with this series and upgrading momentum, this all came down to only 2 buttons, and even now it comes down to 1 button, proving that Ubisoft wanted to go more for style rather than gameplay and control. Of course, I'm not saying this is a bad choice, and it's entirely up to the player what generation of Assassin's Creed controls they might like more. Personally, for me, I'm a big fan of Assassin's Creed 3, even though it does take away a lot from what the originals game did have. And no matter what you will say about Ubisoft and the Assassin's Creed series, you cannot deny that Ubisoft changed the expectations of the overall industry, of what we could expect to interact with an open world in movement, and even what we could do with shooters. It spawned what I like to call the parkour fantasy. EA and DICE created the masterful movement and flow based gameplay of A Mirror's Edge, allowing the players to literally jump into the shoes of faith, proving to the industry that that feeling of freedom in movement can be perfected within the first person. DICE made sure you really did learn as you played the game, and you did feel like you was mastering the movement and getting better as you go, inspiring several FPS shooters to even go forward using this kind of movement style, from battling the undead in Dying Light to that team-based mess that was also called Brink. But nothing illustrated the perfect, pure FPS verticality perfection unlike the awesome story of Titanfall 2. Hot off the press of the release of the first Titanfall, which was a great multiplayer game but didn't have a single player, Respawn knew they had to step up their game for the sequel, being able to provide an incredible story but mixed with the combat that made everybody fall in love with the first game, making sure every single shootout felt like a three-dimensional arena with you being able to jump on and off walls, sliding and even running across walls and allowing you to do double jumps. But also mixed with the incredible and rememberable platform-based levels, it really felt like Titanfall 2 was doing its best to separate itself from the likes of Call of Duty and even Battlefield. This game stood out and even to this day is very underrated in a lot of people's opinion. I definitely recommend giving this game a go, especially if you're a fan of Apex Legends, because they are set within the same universe and even borrow mechanics off each other. But of course it's linked in with the incredible power and mobility of the Titans, which are able to jump in at any moment and even change the landscape of combat. Titanfall 2 is totally worth your time if you haven't ever played a game like it before. I strongly recommend you pick it up and give it a go. And all this momentum and movement really does harken back to the early days of FPS, from games like Doom and even Quake, being able to strafe and move around targets as quick as possible. This is something I actually like to call the shark gameplay. If you stop, you die. And it's really great to see that even in recent years we're seeing games come back to this constant movement and even fast-paced energy from the likes of Doom. Feeling connected to the battlefield and asking players to focus on every single part of their movement, making sure they strafe and avoid enemies like they're the devil themselves. Within this style of shark gameplay, it likes to make sure you stay aggressive but move constantly, taking on many variables like finding ammo, creating advantage points, and even finding the time to place enemies in perfectly timed spots to give off the perfect explosion. It's almost like playing with a power fantasy, but instead of being a superhero, you're a demon killing god. Also, speaking of power fantasies, navigating through cities with superpowers is probably everybody's favourite type of genre when it comes to movement in open worlds. From the likes of super speed with Superman, or even being able to glide through the dark streets of Gotham City, or even having your own powers from the likes of Alec Mercer in Prototype, or even the ways that we navigate within the Infamous series. But if there's one character that has a standard to live up to when it comes to movement within cities, it has to be the web-swinging Spider-Man. What do you want me to tell you about Spider-Man PlayStation 4? That it's one of the most fluid and smoothest looking Spider-Man games that we've ever seen, with a fantastic stories and gorgeous backdrops to swing to, from the way that New York feels so alive as you fly by it, people cheering your name and asking you for autographs. It looks beautiful and it's Spider-Man at top notch. But it's this web swing in itself which is my biggest issue with the game overall. Spider-Man PlayStation 4 actually suffers from the same problem that many modern Assassin's Creed games do as well. It has this sense of false momentum. What do I mean by false momentum? Well, I mean that you're not fully in control of the speed that Spider-Man goes. You can actually see it within a few frames whenever you jump in the air and decide to start swinging. Spider-Man automatically starts moving forward without there being any reason for him to do that. There's nothing for him to be pushed towards that direction. It's almost like he's attached to some sort of string or even wire work. This is actually something that we saw a lot in Assassin's Creed Unity and even the Syndicate's generation of Assassin's Creed, because when you jump towards buildings, it often felt like these characters had magnetic boots of some sort, often attaching them to the closest building but making it look extremely unnatural. But for me to say that it isn't the best web swinging in a Spider-Man game means there has to be one out there that actually challenges it. And let me introduce to you Spider-Man Web of Shadows. Spider-Man Web of Shadows compared to the PlayStation 4 is inferior in almost every single way, but of course the web swinging is what really stands out for me within this game. This is how you can immediately change direction within the PlayStation 4 game. Now take a look at exactly how you can do the same thing within Web of Shadows. You are truly in control of Spider-Man's speed and momentum, with every single web zip and environmental obstacle that you come in contact with being controlled by a press of a button. You have to time every single movement perfectly, whether or not you're choosing to perch on a building and using a lamppost to swing off it to continue that speed, or even being able to turn yourself around with a full 360 web swing. You are in full control of what happens with Spider-Man here. There's no interactive environments for you to suddenly stop and continue an animation, and that's where Spider-Man PlayStation 4 suffers. It's not from the animation quality, no, because it's probably some of the best we've ever seen from the way that the web actually creates tension whenever he throws one out. But I'm talking about the way it uses that magnetic sense of false momentum to actually completely destroy the immersion and even destroy the flow of your momentum. Very much like web swinging, whenever you jump through an object, there's a few frames and even a few slight seconds where you can see Spider-Man being pushed towards the hole and making sure it's lined up perfectly. Where in Web of Shadows there is none of these cool stylish looking animations, but instead it's entirely down to player control. Like I said earlier, if you wanted to swing off a lamppost, then it's entirely down to you to make sure you press the LB button or even L2 button exactly at the right time to time it. There's no pre-animation, there's no lining it up, it's as soon as you go near it you connect to it and keep going. It continues that sense of speed and makes sure Spider-Man never stops unless the player wants him to. Having full control of your character's movement, speed in combat and even the way we explore our worlds, asking the player to learn and master is something that I really like to look out for. Of course I understand that all games shouldn't be like this, you shouldn't always give a player a tough learning curve if they just want to walk up a pair of stairs, but when it comes to controls I like to believe that it's a factor that people should have enough engagement and even thought behind it. It's a reason why I love games like Vanquished or even Death Stranding. Though they're two complete opposites, they both need you to master and understand the ways you can use these movements to deliver the package or even pull off the coolest looking tricks. A game that allows gameplay to really make you wonder whether or not your next step is going to have a major consequence behind it is something very exciting, whether or not that be death or even that would be you tripping down and falling down a hill. I think being able to gain control of your character and really feeling like you are the character, learning the skills and learning the way to get around the maps is something that players should really become accustomed to, because it really makes you feel like you are engaged and you are within the characters and even heroes' boots. And I think the reason why I focus on this, and I think it's quite a big deal for me, is because I don't like every day being the same. I get quite bored and fed up of just having days where I'm just going through the motions. I like to have days where I relax and sit down and watch YouTube or play some video games or even read some comics every now and then, but sometimes I like there to be a little bit of change. I like to be in full control of my day and exactly what I'm doing and what my thought process is during that day, whether or not it's going to be me sitting down making a video or writing a script or even recording some footage. I like to know that each day is going to be different as it comes, because at least I'm always working on something that can eventually be different, or at least eventually be seen by hundreds of people that I know is going to be quite fun, or at least engaging for some people. It's a reason why I love making YouTube, and I love the fact that everyone seems to be pretty on board with my video essays. I love sitting down and creating these for people and engaging on new topics every single week. To be able to sit down and not just press forward and go through the motions of my day is fantastic, and it makes me feel like I'm actually going towards some sort of purpose, and I really do thank you all for that. Or maybe for me it's just like Mirror's Edge or even Titanfall or even Spider-Man Web of Shadows. Having full control and knowing that it's down to me to master, to learn it, really gives me that sense of empowerment and even makes it feel like I kind of earned that title of being called the hero. Thank you guys so much for watching. I know I'm probably going to receive some dislikes for saying what I said about PlayStation 4's Spider-Man, but I want you to know that I do love that game and I adore it, so please don't think I hate the game and I'm just hating on it and whatever. But please tell me down below what you really thought of this video, and please tell me if you enjoyed this video. Of course, if you did, why not leave a like and subscribe? And of course, even just talk to me and tell me what you think is some of your favourite games and even movement systems within games, whether or not they're first person or even third person. I would really like to know, and I think it's cool to engage with you guys. And of course, we recently just went past 900 subscribers, and I just want to say thank you so much for every single person who's watched, subscribed and even shared my videos. I really do appreciate it, and I really do hope that some of the video ideas and projects I've got coming up are stuff that you guys will really enjoy. So of course, thank you so much for watching, and of course I'll see you at the next checkpoint. Bye bye.